Hey guys. Okay, so we're going to be moving into our next section here over the next two lessons. We're going to be talking about something that people don't normally talk about or get uncomfortable talking about it. However, it's something that we're all going to experience and go through in life, and that is death. So we're going to start off with this week talking about death, the afterlife, and God's throne. I'm going to start us off with a passage in the Old Testament from Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 2. It says, "It's better to spend your time at funerals than at parties. After all, everyone dies. So the living should take this to heart." So for each of our lives, there's two options of leaving this earth. Number one, the rapture, which we talked about. Number two is death. You will experience one of those two. So far, everyone before you has experienced death. So it's something that's coming. So people don't really like to talk about it. We tend to try to avoid it. It's kind of a scary topic, but scripture promises it is a healthy topic to talk about. And that's exactly what we're going to do this week. So I'm going to start off with talking about my daughter. There's her picture. That's Zadie. Zadie was born with Cruzon syndrome a few years ago. Basically, what Cruzon syndrome was or is a genetic disorder where her skull just did not form properly in the womb. Um, it's kind of a rare disease. However, we have met a lot of kids that have Cruzon syndrome. Since Zadie, she opened up our world to this syndrome, and these kids they're awesome. We love each and every one of them. It's a tough life that they have. Your skull not forming properly brings all kinds of problems. So, like Zadie's sutures were fused prematurely, so her brain didn't have space to grow. Her skull not forming properly brought other issues like hearing. One of her ear canals was closed. Her eyes and her vision, her breathing was restricted. She couldn't swallow, so we had to feed her through a tube in her through a G tube in her tummy. So my poor little girl, she was with us for 14 months down here on Earth, and it was a pretty tough year of life for her. She had about 7 surgeries in her time down here with us. However, Zadie was amazing. Her personality was beautiful. She was so full of love and happiness, even with the hand that she was dealt. She loved to stick her tongue out. It was her favorite thing to do. She'll look at you and stick her tongue out at you. It's kind of her staple there and her personality. She had a little station in our living room where she would always lay. We called it Zadie Station, where she would lay and watch TV. She loved watching TV. Her favorite show was Masha and the Bear. She would love watching that show. Um, and so even though a lot of her life was spent in hospitals doing surgery, there was a lot of fun stuff that she did, and there was a lot of joy and love that she brought to our family, and things that we got to enjoy. Um, with me, she loved to always touch my face. That was kind of Zadie's thing. Um, it always ministered to me as well. Every time she'd touch my face, she loved pulling her brother's hair. That was always fun. She would communicate. She wasn't able to talk, but she had different ways of communicating. She'd always do this kind of shoulder shrug to me to say hello, and I miss her dearly, and I would look forward to spending some more time with her um, up in heaven when I get up there. It's sad to me that it was such a short period of time, and I wish I could have had more time with her, but I am very grateful for her life, her short life, and I would not give it up for anything. Regardless of the Cruzon syndrome and the bad stuff that came with it, the good outweighed the bad. And the love we got from Zadie and got to pour out to Zadie and continue to pour out to all the Cruzon syndrome kids is her legacy, and her 14 months from April 16, 2021 to July 3rd, 2022 was the best year of our lives. So I want to share a little bit about the day she died on July 3rd. Sorry if I choke up a little bit. It's kind of tough. Um, there's Zadie's last day on earth. So that morning, July 3rd, 2022, probably around 5 or so in the morning, Zadie from her room gave these two loud screams. It was very loud, and we were awake because just prior to that, I had a dream. And I still remember this dream vividly. In my dream, Zadie was lying in front of me and she died. And the dream was very powerful, and it woke me up in my bed. And I woke up like 5 something in the morning. It woke my wife Sherry up next to me, and she got up and we looked at each other. And right then we heard those two screams coming from Zadie's room. So we got up, we went to her room, and Zadie was okay. She was lying in her crib. She was awake. My wife Sherry went and kind of patted her butt like she usually does and calmed her down. Zadie looked at her, and Zadie went back to sleep. I kind of stayed at the door because whenever Zadie would see me, she would think it's playtime, and it didn't matter if it was 5 in the morning or whatever time it was. She was not going back to sleep if she saw me, so I kind of stayed at the doorway and didn't let her see me. Knowing what I know now, that was her goodbye. I regret that. I wish I would have got to say goodbye to her, but I didn't know at the time. So, anyways, my wife Sherry put Zadie back to sleep, and then we went back to sleep. And when we woke up a few hours later, I went to Zadie's room and I found her. Her body was there, but Zadie was gone. She had passed away in her sleep that morning. I immediately took her out of her crib, started doing CPR. Sherry called 911. They came. They picked her up. They took her to the hospital. We followed. Our pastors met us at the hospital. Some friends met us at the hospital. And Zadie did not come back. So we spent that day in the hospital with Zadie's body. Those are the pictures you see there now for a few hours. And that week was also pretty tough. We were kind of in shock with the realization that Zadie was no longer with us, and we just kind of sat on it for that week. Family and friends started coming over from different states over the next few days and supporting us, which was awesome. And that week of just sitting and processing and mourning my daughter was so valuable. And we can talk about this more in our discussion about mourning and what's healthy with that as well. We eventually had a funeral service. We had a memorial service for her at our church, which I'm going to post a link there. It was live streamed. Zadie had hundreds of views from all over the world of people following her. The church congregation was full. A lot of people we didn't even know showed up. And I can't stress enough the importance that when someone passes away, when someone loses a family member, go to the memorial service. Make it your utmost priority. You don't have to say anything, but just your presence there means so much to the family. After that, we had a funeral procession to the cemetery. There was a line of cars following us. Cars on the road were pulling to the side and stopping as we passed by on the way to the cemetery. And then we buried Zadie's body right there. This picture is touching to me. Is her brother Eli looking at his sister's grave. And and we have a hope in our family in the resurrection that's coming and in the rapture. And we cannot wait until Zadie comes back, takes up her body, and bursts out of that grave. So there's a little sharing on my daughter's passing. So what I want to throw over to you guys for this Wednesday is, have you ever lost someone close, or know someone who's passed away? And if so, if you feel comfortable, I would love to hear about them on Wednesday when we meet. I'd like to hear about their life, about their death, how they passed away, and the effect that losing them has had on you. So, not a requirement, but if you feel comfortable, come with the stories. It is healthy to talk about loved ones who pass away and who go on. It's healthy for your soul. It's healthy for me every time I talk about Sadie. So that'll be our first issue for discussion when we meet on Wednesday. I want to share another passage. This one's in the New Testament, Luke chapter 16, when Jesus told a story about a man who died, a man named Lazarus. He said there was a certain rich man who was splendidly clothed in purple and fine linen, who lived each day in luxury. And at his gate laid a poor man named Lazarus, who was covered with sores. And as Lazarus lay there longing for scraps from the rich man's table, the dogs would come and lick his open sores. Finally, the poor man, Lazarus, died and was carried by the angels to sit beside Abraham at the heavenly banquet. The rich man also died and was buried, and he went to the place of the dead. Okay, so I want to focus on verse 22 with Lazarus. Notice that when Lazarus died, it says angels came and carried him away to be at the heavenly banquet. We're going to focus on that this Wednesday, as well as we talk about the afterlife. And I want you to notice too, everyone dies. Even the rich man who did not help Lazarus, he also died, and he went somewhere else. He went to the place of the dead. We'll talk about the different places of the dead in the next lesson on the following week. But for this week, I want to focus how when Lazarus died, the angels came and got him. So it indicates, and this story is from Jesus himself, it indicates that death is not the end. When you die, you go on, you move on, and you live on. So I want to focus on that. Here is a few days after Zadie passed away. I finally got the courage to look at her monitor. We had a monitor that kept an eye on her breathing, because one of the possibilities with her syndrome was that she could develop sleep apnea and have breathing issues. So this monitor we got monitored her breathing rate while she was sleeping. Quick orientation on it here. So this was July 3rd, the day she died. Notice she's had her sleeping for 11 hours, which was normal. Zadie slept a lot. She would normally go to sleep around 9 p.m. and would wake up usually around 9 a.m. So she usually slept about 12 hours. That was her normal. There's a little legend. Notice too, I want you to notice it says that she woke up at 7:40, which is interesting because I found Zadie at 9 a.m. in her crib, her body anyways. Not at 7:40. I found her at 9 a.m. So more on that later. And I want you to look at the legend there. Blue indicates she was sleeping and the monitor was monitoring her breathing. Green is movement. These are the times that Zadie kind of woke up in the night or did a big movement that the monitor caught. So at that point, it's not really analyzing the breathing because she's moving and she's active. Remember, this monitor is to monitor her breathing while sleeping, to try to find sleep apnea. The next one, red, is no movement, would indicate Zadie's not moving and not breathing. Notice it did not do that at all. And then the last one was away. Away, the yellow one, the logic there of the monitor is the monitor senses another presence in the room. So for example, whenever Sherry and I or the boys would enter the room, the monitor would pick up all the commotion and it'll momentarily go into no movement, like to stop monitoring Zadie's breathing. And after a couple minutes, if it didn't sense Zadie anymore, the logic of the monitor was that we picked her up and took her away. And then that's why the monitor automatically goes to away mode. So I want you to notice when Zadie passed away, it didn't stay in no movement. It actually went to away mode, as if we went in there or someone went in there and picked her up and left, and it sensed that Zadie was no longer there. So when we woke up that morning, the first thing Sherry saw on the monitor was Zadie is away, which was weird because her body was still in the video footage. She indeed was away. Her soul was. She left her body behind. There's more cool things we got. So here's her breathing rate throughout the night. We can actually focus on her actual breathing rate, respiratory per minute, kind of her average was about 15 RPM throughout the night. That was her normal every day. So that night she was breathing normally. Towards the end though, I want you to notice something very interesting the monitor caught. It caught a massive blast of breath. Now this was not normal. The only time the monitor will catch a massive breath like that would be when the boys or us ran into the room and there was just a lot of commotion and the monitor would kind of spike and then it'd be like, oh, this is not Zadie, and then it'd go into away mode, which is exactly what it did at 7:40 a.m. Now, we were all sleeping. We did not wake up till about 9 a.m. That day when I found Zadie, and that's the green that you see later on there with the no movement. So at 7:40 a.m., that was my daughter's time of death, proven by this monitor, and there was a massive blast of energy. It registered it as a huge breath. Now, the other thing this monitor does is it has a visual footage as well. So I didn't recognize this until, like I said, 4 or 5 days later. I had the courage to look at the monitor. And when I looked at the video footage at 7:40 a.m. when this huge breath came, Zadie's body did not move. So if it was a huge breath or inhale or exhale, you would see her body kind of do this. Her body was still. There was no movement at all. As a matter of fact, her final hour, there was no movement. She was in her favorite sleeping position. So I believe this massive breath that the monitor caught, it's probably her soul or presence of angels coming to carry her to paradise or wherever she's going to go, which we'll talk about later. So there you go. I think I have proof, caught on Zadie's monitor, that there is life after death. Now, a little bit later, I was able to get into the monitor more and zoom in more to the actual minute during that time. And I caught even more cool facts here. So as you can see on the far left, Zadie's last breath was 7:37 a.m. This was her last normal breath. Then the monitor went into green, which is movement, which was interesting because in the video footage, there was no movement. Her body was still at 7:37. So I'm not sure exactly what that movement was that it caught. There was nothing on the video footage. So I don't know, maybe her spirit. And then it did actually go into red mode for 2 minutes, which is no breathing, no movement, death. Now what's interesting, on our monitor in the room that's linked to this, if it ever goes into red, we get an alarm to wake us up. We did not get an alarm that morning that Zadie stopped breathing. So don't know what happened there. And then a few minutes after that, at 7:41, came the massive blast of energy. Now you can see the energy lasted for 3 minutes. Each one of those vertical bars is a minute. So it was a 3-minute blast of energy. So definitely not a breath or an exhale. Nobody exhales for 3 minutes. So some more details there. So her soul just leaving her body. Were there angels present to take her soul out of her body, or all of the above? I think is what was caught there on the monitor. So if you question whether there is life after death, hopefully this is some proof for you that there is. No doubt, I have no doubt in my mind, my daughter lives on and her soul lived on. After 7:34, there's no more presence. She was gone. So by the time I found her around 9 a.m., that's like the movement that it caught. It was me coming into the room. Zadie was long gone for about an hour and a half. So my CPR was pretty much worthless at that point. Okay. All right. I want to now kind of shift gears, or not shift gears, but talk more about evidence for afterlife. So Zadie's first week. So that first week after she passed away, her grandma Esther, which was in the Philippines at this time, she said that Zadie visited her. This was probably about 5 days. It was. I'm trying to remember exactly. It was definitely after 3 days. I think it was around 5 days after Zadie passed away. Because we were on our way to the airport to pick up my aunt Yoli, who was flying in from Miami. And we got a phone call from the Philippines from Grandma Esther. And in the phone call, she started saying, I saw Zadie, I saw Zadie, I saw Zadie. I'm like, what? So we pulled over because I was driving and we heard her story. And she said that she was sleeping and then she didn't know if she was dreaming or half awake, but she sat on her bed and she saw Zadie clothed in white, glowing, and Zadie walked up to her, which was interesting because Zadie did not walk. And Zadie said, um, Lola Esther. And then Grandma Esther woke up and Zadie was gone. And then she immediately called us. So we're driving to the airport to pick up my Aunt Yoni. We're like, whoa, that's cool. I gotta get back on the road. Yoli's waiting on the curve. So we went to the curve. We picked up Aunt Yoli at the airport. And Aunt Yoli gave us a big hug. She just flew from Miami, and we're happy, right? We got big smiles. We just heard, Zadie's. I mean, it was a cool Zadie's around, right? And then my Aunt Yoli got kind of pale, and she sat in the back of the car, quiet, as we told her about Grandma Esther's phone call. And then I asked her, "Are you okay? You're not talking." And she's like, "I can't believe this." I go, "What do you mean you can't believe this?" So I'm like, "I know it's kind of hard to believe." She's like, "No, no, no, that's not what I meant at all. Zadie visited me as well last night." I said, "Wait a second, what are you talking about?" She's like, "It was just like what you just told me. I was in my bed, um, and then I saw her standing in a distance. She didn't walk up to Aunt Yoli, but she saw her standing in a distance, clothed in white, glowing as well, holding the hand of Aunt Yoli's aunt, who had passed away 10 years ago. And they were just standing there, and then Aunt Yoli woke up. And so back to back, right away we got these two stories, and we're like, wow, that's cool. So are these visitations? Is they letting us know that she's all right and she's living on? Um, After that, so that was on the first week, and then about after 2 weeks of Zadie being gone, we started getting reports of other visitations by Zadie. My grandma Rebecca, Zadie's great grandma. Oh, and I forgot to mention what was interesting about the first two visits with Grandma Esther and Yoli is they were actually caregivers as well. Zadie for uh, uh, Grandma Esther for Zadie's first 4 months lived with us and did some caregiving of Zadie. And then Aunt Yoli, after that, would come for the surgeries and help us out in taking care of Zadie as she recovered from surgery. So those two were caregivers of Zadie, and it's almost like Zadie went to visit them and kind of like to say thank you and I'm okay because it had hit them hard on Zadie's passing. Okay, now, that was on the first week. After 2 weeks, after the 14th day, or on the 14th day, my grandma Rebecca, Zadie's great grandma, called me and she had a similar visitation. Now, I want you to keep in mind, Aunt Yoli, Grandma Esther, they didn't know each other. Aunt Yoli lived in Miami. Grandma Esther lived in the Philippines. Grandma Esther's from my wife's side of the family. Aunt Yoli is my side of the family. And then Grandma Rebecca is on my side of the family, but on my mother's side. So none of these three really talked to each other and like shared each other's story, but they all had the same kind of experience. Grandma Rebecca called me and said in Spanish, because she speaks Spanish, I saw Zadie. I go, what do you mean? What did you see? She said, I saw her. She was glowing and she looked older and she walked up to me and she said, Abuela in Spanish. It was cool. And then Grandma Rebecca woke up. Grandma Rebecca did not know the story about Aunt Yoli or Grandma Esther. So it's kind of neat that the three of them kind of had the same experience without knowing each other had the same experience. Um, then there was some other interesting, uh, I call them visits, right? Levi's dream, which I'll cover in a minute in the next slide. Aunt Christina, Zadie's aunt. She told us that she was cooking in her kitchen. She looked up and she momentarily saw Zadie in the doorway and then gone in a flash. This was about just after 2 weeks after Zadie passed away. There was the visit with Zia's family, which I'll cover in a minute. And then on the 80th day after Zadie had passed away, so about 2.5 months later, I was on a trip. I'm a pilot, so I was out in Texas and I was staying in a hotel. And that night, I finally dreamed of Zadie. I had been wanting to dream of Zadie for so long. Everybody was having dreams of her except me. I wanted to dream of her and I couldn't. But that night, I finally had a dream of Zadie. She didn't talk to me or much, but she just kind of like walked or ran kind of by me, and I knew it was her. And then all of a sudden, she was in my arms, and I was looking at her. I could feel her weight, and she went ah, which is what she always would do to me, make this noise like that. And then I woke up. And I was like, wow, that was a cool dream. Like, thank you. Like I saw my daughter again. Well, that morning I woke up and I knew I knew Sherry was asleep. So I waited till the morning. And when I knew she was awake and I called her and I said, I finally dreamed of Zadie. And I told her about the dream. And then Sherry's like, oh my gosh, so did I. Because Sherry also was unable to dream about Zadie. And she had been wanting to. And on the same night when we were in different towns, I was in Texas and Sherry was back home here in Tennessee. She told me she had a dream of Zadie as well on the 80th night. Sherry's dream was cool. She saw the curtain. She was like in the guest room downstairs. And she saw the curtain moving and then she saw Zadie's hand, kind of like if she was behind the curtain. One of the things Sherry and Zadie used to always do is they always used to play peekaboo. Zadie would cover her face with one of her toys or something and then kind of peekaboo to Sherry, and that was their fun thing. Well, in the dream, Zadie was doing that with the curtain and peekaboo. And then she ran to Sherry. Sherry picked her up and Sherry said the same thing that I said. She could feel Zadie's weight. And then she woke up. So that was the last time we've had a dream like that about Zadie on her 80th day. No one else since then has reported any kind of visitation or dream. I mean, we've had dreams of her, but it wasn't like that. It's more of a memory dream. That was the only time that we had what felt like Zadie in the presence, like if she visited us. So kind of cool. I wanted to share those with you guys. Okay, Levi's dream and visit with Zia's family. Levi's dream. So Levi is a 10-year-old boy with Cruzon syndrome as well. And he had a dream one night. And the morning after, he told his grandma about the dream. He said that he went to heaven in the night in his dream and saw his uncle Sandy and some other relatives, Jason Robertson. These are all relatives who had passed away, which we learned from Levi's grandma. And then as he's explaining this visit to his grandma, he said, Jesus, and I saw Jesus rocking Zadie. And then Levi said that Jesus told him that he will be with him one day, but he had to go back. So then Levi woke up back in his bed in the morning, and when his grandma picked him up, he told his grandma the dream. Well, his grandma posted this, and then my wife Sherry saw it, and she just couldn't believe it. She told me about it, and we were just so happy to hear Jesus was rocking Zadie. And this was from a 10-year-old boy. Do not believe he's trying to make this up or just, he hadn't even met Zadie before in person. They were in the hospital together during one of the surgeries, but they didn't get to meet. And he was present for Zadie's memorial service in the church, but he never ever met Zadie or really saw Zadie face to face of what she looked like. But he was able to recognize her in his dream, which he reported was an actual visit to heaven, where he was told he needed to come back. So there's a cool story. And the other one, Zia's family, another Cruzon syndrome baby, who, after Zadie passed away, we sent him Zadie's hearing aid because Zadie didn't need it anymore. Her hearing is great now. And Zia needed it, and those things are kind of expensive, so we sent it to Zia. We had always joked that Zia and Zadie were soulmates. They were born close to each other. Their names both started with Z. Every time Zia would see Zadie on the screen, he'd want to like touch her. So we always joked that we're gonna, arrange their marriage one day. But anyways, when we send this hearing aid, Zia's mom, Mia, messaged Sherry and said, I haven't told anyone this, but the other day when we received Zadie's hearing aid, Zia's toy guitar kept going off in front of the living room where it was hidden underneath a pillow and where no one was. And she felt that it was sweet Zadie telling her that she was with him. She said that's never happened before with the guitar, and that threw her off guard. My wife's response, of course, was like, really? Like goosebumps? Did it scare you? Make sure to turn the guitar off, kind of making a joke of it. And Mia responded, oh, I did. Then the walker went off. if she's letting her presence known, she was doing it. So could be that she went and visited Zia's family as well upon receiving her hearing aid. So again, this was all within the 80 days of Zadie's passing. After that, there was no more reports. Probably she's gone up in heaven with the Lord and no longer visiting. But she did let us know that after she died, she was very alive and well. So there you go. Cool stories I wanted to share with you. And this Wednesday, I want to hear from you guys. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on the afterlife? And if you guys have any stories of loved ones after they passed or anything similar to what I just shared, please share it. I love to hear it. And we'll talk also about some near-death experiences that people have had out there and how there's a lot of proof that life continues after death. Okay, the last part. Here's a verse from Hebrews chapter 9. It says, just as each person is destined to die once, after that comes judgment. The last thing I want to talk about with me on Wednesday is about the judgment that happens after you die. So going back to our main text, Revelation chapter 4, it's a short chapter. It basically describes the throne room of God, which would seem to be where we go after our death for our judgment that happens after our death. There's an initial judgment that happens after death, as we just read in Hebrews 9. And when we get to Revelation 20, we'll see about a final judgment that happens at the end of the age. So for this week, I want to focus on the initial judgment, the judgment that everybody goes through after they die, whether you're a believer or not. So in Revelation chapter 4, let's read about the throne room, or the courtroom, I guess, where the judgment happens. Revelation chapter 4. So John looks, he saw a door standing open in heaven, and the same voice he had heard before spoke to him like a trumpet blast. The voice said, come up here, and I will show you what must happen after this. And instantly I was in the Spirit, and I saw a throne in heaven and someone sitting on it. The one sitting on the throne was as brilliant as gemstones, like jasper and carnelian. And the glow of an emerald circled his throne like a rainbow. 24 thrones surrounded him, and 24 elders sat on them. They were all clothed in white and had gold crowns on their heads. From the throne came flashes of lightning and the rumble of thunder. In front of the throne were 7 torches with burning flames, the sevenfold Spirit of God, which we talked about in the previous class. And in front of the throne was a shiny sea of glass sparkling like crystal. In the center and around the throne were 4 living beings. I want you guys to kind of picture what this throne room looks like as we read about it. These 4 living beings were each covered with ice, front and back. It's kind of weird. The first of these living beings was like a lion. The second was like an ox. The third had a human face. And the fourth was like an eagle in flight. Each of these living beings had 6 wings, and their wings were covered all over with ice, inside and out. Day after day and night after night, they keep on saying, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God, the Almighty, the one who always was, who is, and who is still to come." That's the Father. Whenever the living beings give glory and honor and thanks to the one sitting on the throne, the one who lives forever and ever, the 24 elders fall down and worship the one sitting on the throne, the one who lives forever and ever. And they lay their crowns before the throne and say, "You are worthy, O Lord our God, to receive glory, honor, and power. For you created all things, and they exist because you created what you please." Think about that for a minute. If it wasn't for God, none of us would even exist. So at a minimum, we owe him thanks for even creating us, and the life that we got is a gift from him. So that's the end of chapter 4. I told you it's a short chapter, and it describes the throne of God. I found this picture online, which is kind of cool, which basically took the chapter and turned the words into a picture to kind of visualize what you read in the chapter. So I want you to go back and read chapter 4 again. Maybe pause and have this picture up. You could see the one sitting on the throne, shining, the Father, in the middle. He has this emerald glow around him. Just cool. When I thought emerald glow, I kind of thought of like, if you've seen pictures of the Aurora Borealis, kind of like that glowing around him and flowing around him. You got the lampstand in front of him, which represents the sevenfold Spirit of God, the Holy Spirit, flowing from his throne. You got the 4 beasts that are kind of around him. In Ezekiel chapter 1, you can read more about these beasts. They're called cherubim, and they guard God's throne. And then you got these 24 elders that kind of sit around him on their own 24 thrones, and they worship him. Okay, this is the picture depicted in Revelation chapter 4. It's the throne room of God. You can see the shiny sea of glass in the floor in front of him. And it would appear that when we go for our judgment in front of the throne of God, this is kind of what we're going to see. We're going to be coming before this and bowing before him. It says in Hebrews, every knee will bow. And you will sit there in front of this 24 elders, these beasts, and God himself on the throne, and you will be judged for what you did with your life. Every single person will go through this, as we read in Hebrews chapter 9. Whether you're a believer or not, you will come before the throne after you depart this earth. So there's a humbling thought that I want you guys to think about. So our third issue for discussion Wednesday will be, what are your thoughts on this judgment that you're going to go through after you die? I want to hear what you want to talk about, the process of it, what you guys think, how it's going to go down, the fairness of it. Is it fair for God to judge us? And talk about the judge himself sitting on the throne, the one who created us. So we'll end our discussion with this on Wednesday. So kind of sit on that and think about it, and know that one day you're gonna come in front of that throne room that we saw in this previous slide, and you're gonna be held accountable for what you do with your life. So we'll talk about that on Wednesday. That'll be fun. Okay, I got a little homework for you before Wednesday. This is not in the Bible, but there is a text out there. It's called the Vision of Paul. It's an apocrypha text. Not to be confused, there's another writing, the Gnostic Coptic Apocalypse of Paul. It's not that. It's a text that's found in the Ante-Nicene Fathers, Volume 9. And I'm going to put a link in the comments here, and also in the email I send you guys, on where you can find this text. It's free. It's posted on a website. And while this work was not canon, it didn't make it into the Bible, and a lot of church leaders didn't accept it, it did help shape the beliefs of many Christians concerning the nature of the afterlife. It kind of goes back to when Paul had a near-death experience. In 2 Corinthians 12, Paul says that he was caught up to the third heaven 14 years ago. And he couldn't tell whether he was in his body or out of his body. Only God knows. But basically, he had this experience where he went up to the third heaven, to the throne room, and was shown things. This event is also caught in Scripture in the book of Acts, chapter 14, where Paul was stoned to death and dragged out of town, and he was dead, and everybody thought he was dead, and the believers gathered around him, and he came back to life. He got up, and then he went back into town. That event is what Paul was talking about in 1 Corinthians in the previous slide, where he had this experience 14 years ago where he was caught up to the third heaven. So the story goes, he then wrote his near-death experience. That's the homework that I'm going to get you to read. And it was found after his death in his home by a person who lived in his home afterwards. He found this text, the vision of Paul, buried or inside the house, in the foundations of the house. And then he sent it to the Roman emperor, and part of it got sent to Jerusalem as well. It was copied, and that's how we got the vision of text, or the vision of Paul's text. The Catholic Church at the Vatican holds it. It's now public. It's posted on, you can find it online. The website and the link there, sacredtext.com, has a lot of Apocrypha, and it's in there. And all the ante-Nicene writings are all in there for you to read. It's a plethora of stuff, extra biblical stuff that you could read. But for your homework assignment before Wednesday, I want you to just read paragraphs 14, 15, 16, 17. That's the assignment. If you want to read the entire vision of Paul, awesome. Go at it. It's a really interesting read. But as far as assignment for Wednesday, read paragraphs 14 through 17, and we'll talk about it. You'll see it'll talk about Paul's near-death experience. It'll talk about how he sees people dying. He sees souls coming out of body, the part that angels play in it. He sees the judgment in front of the throne that we just talked about in Revelation chapter 4. And he goes on to see the different places of the dead, which we'll talk about in the next class. So happy reading with that. Reread Revelation 4 again. Try to picture that throne room. And come ready to discuss this Wednesday. We'll see you then. God bless.